Hello, welcome to Module 4 of Azure CSP SMB Sales Fundamentals. My name is Kenny. I'm doing the webinar today. Today we'll be covering Windows Virtual Desktop. It's all about Windows Virtual Desktop today. Here's our agenda. What is Windows Virtual Desktop? Sales motions for WVD, Aperture, and WVD Lighthouse program. So Windows Virtual Desktop, or WVD for short. What is it? It's a desktop and app virtualization service that runs on Azure. You might be familiar with terminal services, RDS, Citrix, or Horizon View with VMware. Windows Virtual Desktop is a remote desktop and publish application platform as a service on Azure running on Windows 10 or Windows Server. It's the only way you can run Windows 10 multi-session on public cloud. This is the recent view on desktop as a service opportunities across the world. With a 32.1% annual growth across all DaaS solutions. There's a forecast of almost $3 billion worldwide for DaaS revenue growth in 2021. Currently, more remote desktop and app solutions are running on Windows Server located on premises or co-located data centers as compared to the public cloud. This restricts hosting providers the ability to scale quickly, the core essential ability that is available on public cloud or Azure. WVD allows you to run Windows 10 in multi-session mode. This means that you get a full Windows 10 desktop that is scalable, similar to what a RDS or terminal server would be. For application compatibility, this means that multi-session Windows 10 service sort of sits in between a Windows Server RDS and the single desktop Windows 10 VDI. This means that you might still have some compatibility issues due to multi-session mode, but you're more compatible than you would be against Windows Server 2016. WVD is optimized to run Office 365 E3 and above. If you use the Windows 10 image for WVD, it's already optimized, so you don't need to do any further configuration on it. You just use the image, set it up, install the applications you need, and off you go. You can bring Windows 7 on and run on Azure with WVD, but only on single desktop VDI mode. There is no multi-session capability for Windows 7, but you do get the free extended security updates that come with putting the Windows 7 VMs on Azure. Now, that said, I mean, ESU is currently, well, the cost for ESU will double up every year, so it might be a good idea to put Windows 7 on WVD if you really, really need to run applications on Windows 7. More on that sales case later. Virtualization helps companies address specific business needs. So more secure access to data organizational resources, compliance with industry regulations like FSI, healthcare, government, an increasingly elastic workforce, like if you have a merger or acquisition, short-term employees, seasonal employees, contractors, and partner access, or just vendor access as well, vendor support access as well. Employee-specific needs. It caters for BYOD or mobile staff, call centers, branch workers. This is great for people working from home type solution. Specialized workloads for designing and engineering, legacy applications, software development, test applications. So you can get 3D enabled graphics workloads on Azure as well. Windows Virtual Desktop helps employees stay as productive with a virtualized experience on a PC, phone, tablet, or browser as they are as they are with physical PC sitting right in front of them. It helps you simplify management, provisioning, and access to corporate data and application. So if you need to rebuild the VM, you can without, you can just redeploy the VM without needing to take the laptop back to the office and re-image the laptop, reinstall all the application, and hand it off to the end user. Support customers. It allows you to support customers as they migrate to the cloud. So what that means is it's a lot easier to connect to the remote desktop solutions than trying to connect to the laptops that users might be using on the go. The amount of bandwidth required to connect is a lot lower sense. It also helps reduce the cost and resources associated with managing on-premises infrastructure. So what this means is, you can adopt a BYOD model, hand off or get users to buy their own laptops and have them connect to the corporate environment on the VDI, on the Windows Virtual Desktop. The Windows Virtual Desktop itself is the portions of the environments that is being uh, controlled and managed by the corporation, by the company. Um, Therefore, security-wise as well, you have a dedicated space that is for users' business work, and then it's isolated out of their existing laptop environment or wherever they're connecting from. Another example of what you could actually do is deploy thin clients instead of full fat clients, um, and have the thin clients connect to virtual desktops. This is a very common scenario with traditional VDI solutions and RDS solutions. What this means is that we can bring that into public cloud and have the advantages of public cloud like scalability and everything like that. So it empowers the IT department to transform the workplace to a more flexible and moving workplace. Now, Windows 10 and Office 365 on WVD, they're always kept up to date with the cloud connected management powered by Config Manager, SCCM, and Intune. This provides the most productive and most secure computing experience for users while lowering the total cost of ownership and reducing the complexity for IT teams. It's designed for all customer types across all segments. M365 is the best way for customers to license the products and services necessary to deliver this experience. The reason why we're talking about M365 is because M365 has Intune. It has the Office 365 component built into it. So, and as well as that, it's got the security components as part of the EMS suite, like conditional access and MFA. I mean, we're putting the hosted desktop into the cloud, which means users can access it from anywhere. That sort of introduces a bigger attack vector for vulnerabilities for hackers to sort of exploit. So what you got to do is protect the users with things like MFA, with conditional access, with um, all of the different security suites available to Azure, like part of the security center, let's say. So the next slide. So blending the security of the convergence of the Microsoft ecosystem. So how does that tie in with Windows Virtual Desktop? Some of the built-in security offered by WVD are the reverse connect, Azure AD authentication, and the machines that are on WVD have to be AD joined. This is ADDS that we're talking about, domain services, so traditional AD join. This means that you can apply group policies to the machines through your traditional AD. Windows Virtual Desktop is linked to M365 security features like conditional access, MFA, role-based access controls. These are the sort of things that I was trying to talk about before. All of this exists within the Microsoft Azure, we believe, Microsoft Azure environment. We believe our customers should fully trust the cloud they choose to bank on for their business. We drive to provide the most secure and compliant cloud platform with the privacy at the center of all our innovations. Microsoft's cloud has the most certifications in all public cloud. It's also got the secured foundation for all cloud services, including some of the best physical security. The operational security through continual testing for vulnerabilities and restricted access. All of this I've actually mentioned in module 1. Here's sort of a high-level architecture of what a WVD solution looks like. Now, if you have a look, the only parts that are actually being controlled by the IT department or the CSP partner is the actual session host workload itself. This is the middle part right here. You would put your Windows 7 Enterprise device. You would put your Windows 10 Enterprise devices in it. You would put your multi-session session host devices like Windows Server or Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session. You can also put Windows Remote App into that section, and that's what you're managing. Everything else is being managed by Microsoft. So the control plane is where the RD Web, RD Gateway, the load balancers, the brokers, and the licensing sits. You get all of your diagnostics and management tools there as well. And then the underlying infrastructure, the hosting infrastructure, hosting the VMs are also being managed by Microsoft. So you don't have to be looking after a lot of the components, and what Microsoft believes is that they want you to focus on the important parts, like the actual application and the desktops that you should be looking after. So next section will be looking into different sales motions for WVD. How do you sort of approach your customers, and what are the typical scenarios? There's sort of 3 different scenarios that we'll be looking at. The very first one is replacing or migrating the on-premise virtual desktop environment. When we say virtual desktop environments, we're not really talking about VDI. We're talking about RDS as well. It might be Citrix, just any virtual desktop environments sitting on premises. This means that the customer is already familiar with working with virtual desktop. It's just moving it from on-premises into the cloud, and then taking advantage of the cloud advantage. Moving or providing new modern workplace solutions to customers. This example is more about customers that don't have remote desktop environments, that are currently working on fat clients, on laptops and desktops in your workplace. You want to enable modern workplace. One of the ways is deploying Windows 7 on laptops. Another way is deploying Windows 10 on laptops. Another way is deploying Windows 10 on virtual environments and having thin clients or hot desks environments where people can just log into anywhere in any branch. The last scenario that we'll be looking into is sort of a very special scenario. It's mainly for customers that have application that has to sit on Windows 7. That can't be migrated in Windows 10. And this scenario we'll be tackling that sort of use case in that scenario. So for the first scenario, the replace and migrate on-premises virtual desktop deployments to the cloud. If the customer has an old RDS environment that needs to be replaced, so this is saying the hardware is reaching end of life, or it's running Windows 2008 R2 or Windows 2008, and it's time for us to look at replacing it. Then we want to move it into the cloud to enable the cloud optimization capability, as I as I mentioned in the previous module. Um, we then have to look at the cost comparisons with WVD. You'll find that in most scenarios, WVD will come up a lot cheaper than RDS on Azure. That's purely because of two different components: the licensing cost to access WVD for the infrastructure, the operating system. Um, the operating system cost for Windows Server is replaced by the Windows 10 licensing cost that is part of the M365 suite or the Windows 10 Enterprise license, right? The other component is the infrastructure itself. Um, you're reducing on core infrastructure like the RD Web, RD Gateway, and RD licensing servers. Um, you can also take advantage of, replacing the file server with Azure files, let's say, right? You don't need to use a big file server to host all of the user profiles. You can take advantage of Azure files because it's compatible to the profile store. The cost of the RDS cows, so in terms of licensing, the cost of RDS cows are not much different to Windows 10 Enterprise. It's only a couple of dollars, I think, at the most different. If the customer already has Office 365 E3, then this is an upsell opportunity to M365 E3 because then you can get the additional EMS license that has the Intune, has MFA, has additional access, and the Windows 10 Enterprise add-on, right? With Windows 10 Enterprise, on top of accessing WVD, you've got the ability to enable BitLocker on your device. Right, so it's the additional security that you get as a benefit out of it. If the customer has Office 365 Business Premium, with traditional Office 365 Business Premium, you couldn't run it on RDS anyway. You don't have the shared computer activation component on Office 365 Business Premium. The only way you can run Office 365 Business Premium on an RDS type solution or shared hosted desktop type solution is if you've upgraded it to an M365 Business. That opens up the Office 365 Business Premium with the additional shared computer activation capability. Now, M365 Business is the cheapest Office 365 available product. So we're not talking about Windows 10 Enterprise alone, standalone, but more if you have Office 365. If you need Office 365, then M365 Business should be the one that you're looking into to access WVD. The value adds with Office 365, well, M365 Business is the MFA and conditional access that you get out of it. Also, the upgrading of the Windows 10 Pro to Windows 10 Business to enable additional features on the users and devices. Well, that does help. Once you've counted the cost of the licenses, the differences of the cost of licenses versus the RDS count, right? Then you need to have a look at the cost of the infrastructure. And this is specifically where you would save with WVD. On WVD, you've got infrastructure workloads like RD Gateway, RD Broken, RD Web that are already part of the WVD control plane. So this is, Microsoft manages this. You don't have to look after those servers. There is no need to put antivirus on them. There is no need to patch them. As well as that, the WVD control plane is, or we don't have to say the native WVD control plane. You can have a look at the Citrix Cloud or the VMware Horizon Cloud control planes as well, because they both, the other partners do work with WVD. But what we're saying is especially with the native control plane, you don't need to look after those control plane servers because Microsoft does it for you. You don't have to deploy HA on them because Microsoft did it for you. They put the load balancers, they deployed all of the different components for you. You've got better resiliency in the control plane by going to WVD, right? The alternative is if you're running RDS on Azure, you're going to deploy two different servers for each infrastructure workload, as well as putting a load balancer in front of it, as well as looking after firewalls and things like that. Then it tends to get a bit costly unless you're scaling up to hundreds. Um, on top of that, you have to look at the session host machines. Um, with session host machines on RDS with server, RDS server, you're paying Windows Server rate to VM. So that means the Windows Server OS component of the VM is still charged. It's still charged as part of the RDS solution. With WVD, the OS component is already covered by the WVD access license. So the M365, the Windows 10 Enterprise license, covers that portion already. And this is why when we say, compare RDS Cal versus Windows 10 Enterprise license, it's not really equal because you still have to take into account the Windows Server Standard license and the Windows Server Standard Cal. Right? With WVD, you're paying Linux rates, compute only cost of the VMs on Windows 10 multi-session. So you get the perks of RDS environment, multi-session, but with a Windows 10 desktop and charged at Linux rate. For a new Windows virtualization scenario, so this is typically, the client wants to evolve their business into a modern desktop type solution. This fits the scenarios of BYOD and flexible workforce. This is more of a requirement to scale when required, more than anything else, right? WVD allows you to scale out with auto scaling. It's also got power management features that you wouldn't normally have in RDS. Right? If you require additional features like scaling to on-premises or power management between both cloud and on-premises, or even just deploying to both cloud and on-premises, like hybrid mode, then you might want to consider looking at Citrix Cloud with WVD or VMware with WVD. But if you're just solely focusing on having a solution in the cloud, and most SMBs wouldn't try to do hybrid because the cost is just not feasible, right? In those scenarios, you don't really want to put your workloads. The main use case for having a hybrid scenario for workloads is if you've already got the tin available, you're already running VDI on your on-premise with Citrix, and you want to scale out into the cloud. So those are your scenarios, right? With SMB, you tend to just, you're approaching your hardware lifecycle refresh, and you just want to move everything into the cloud. So typically, you would look at Windows Virtual Desktop Native without the additional cost of Citrix Cloud licensing, but there is still that option if you want to know on user experience and management, and user monitoring and user monitoring. Citrix Cloud and VMware do have a lot of tools that allow, built into their offering that allows you to do that. With Windows Virtual Desktop Native, you'll have to deploy your own management and monitoring tools in order to supplement that feature. The last scenario, and this is sort of a very special scenario, we don't really recommend looking at deploying Windows 7 VDI across all users in your enterprise with WVD unless the core business application can't be moved to Windows 10. This scenario is more of a stopgap. it gives you an additional possibly 2.5 years to move off that application or upgrade the application to be Windows 10 compatible, right? The idea is that you've got an application, an old Access database, for example. They can't run on Windows 10. It can only run on Windows 7. Uh, Access 2000 database or something like that. And only two users out of the 20 or 50 users that you have in your customer organization, only two users run it, right? Or even one user, right? You don't necessarily need to run or keep a Windows 7 device sitting in the storage somewhere in case that user needs to access the data. So what you do is you deploy a Windows 7 virtual desktop on WVD. You put that application, you put the configuration there, and then you chuck it up into Azure, right? Um, you ensure that it needs the desktop is patched with the free ESU that you get for putting it up into Azure. Right? But what that allows you to do is then, okay, let's turn off the machine and save cost. Put it aside, right, and only turn it on whenever we need to patch it. Right? That way, you've got a backup. You've got that machine sitting in the cloud where if someone needs to access that information, you can. It doesn't disappear. Right? Now, also note on a side note to all of these, Windows Virtual Desktop is the only multi-session Windows 10 environment that you can get in multi-cloud or in on-premises. If you're on-premises and you want to run Windows 10, you can, but it's exclusive or it's full VDI mode, right? It's you can do a shared mode or pooled mode where the machines restart and reset when the user logs off. But it's only a one-to-one relationship for Windows 10 VMs. Right? The only way to get RDS-like features on Windows 10 is with WVD. And then, if you want to get RDS-like features on premises, you have to deploy a full RDS solution. You have to think about the Windows Server licenses, as well as the RDS CALs, as well as the Windows Server CALs, right? So it's sort of a cost balancing practice that you got to do there. So with the WVD business model pricing and licensing section here, we're going to be talking about a little bit about how the pricing is and licensing is going to occur. How do we license WVD? So there's a few ways. These are the different licenses that you can access WVD or provides you access to WVD. You would find that many customers are already eligible because they already have Windows or M365 E3 or M365 Business, and this will give them access to WVD. They can just they've already got the OS portion of the cost or sussed out, sorted. Right? If they don't, if you got customers that don't want to run Office 365 on their virtual desktop because it's for users that only run this line of business application and you're just deploying like a remote app for it, let's say, right? You can opt for a Windows 10 Enterprise E3 license. That's the cheapest of these three SKUs here. And that's actually the one that is comparable to the RDS CAL in price. Right? That's your first access. Now, if you have RDS CALs with software assurance on premises, right, or you don't want to run Windows 10 multi-session, you still want to run RDS on Azure, you can still save on the infrastructure cost with the HA and the RD Web, RD Gateway, and the load balancer, by putting the RDS cows with Windows Virtual Desktop, and running the Windows Server version of WVD. You can still do that, right? And that advantage is mainly just to save on the infrastructure cost. The session host servers, you would still be paying full Windows VM rates on it. So with pricing on Windows Virtual Desktop, you only pay for the virtual machines, the storage, and the networking consumed. So you're not paying for the RDS infrastructure portion of it, and you don't pay for the hosting platform, the physical hosting platform, right? But it's also if you're doing WVD with Windows 10, you're only paying Windows Linux prices. But what this means is that you can apply reserve instance to the VM. You can still commit to 1 or 3 year reserve instances and save even further if your virtual desktop is going to run 24/7. What I tend to recommend to people is that if the VM is not running 24/7, decide with the customer how many hours a day that your virtual desktop environment should be running, and you might want to put a portion of it running 24/7 so that at any time users that log on will be able to log on with the best user experience. But there is also power management that lets you spin up the VM on login, right? But the other thing you gotta take into account is that by shutting down the servers 2/3 of the day, you'll be saving a lot more than what you would get with a reserve instance. So those are the considerations you got to take into account when you're deciding on applying reserve instance. And so this is the slide I sort of described there, right? All discounts and benefits that apply to Azure applies to WVD because WVD sits on Azure in the end of the day. If you've got, with WVD, you have to have an Active Directory. So your domain control of VMs will be running 24/7. So you would want to, if you can, if you're allowed to, and you're compatible to it, you have the licenses for it. Apply Azure Hybrid User Benefit. Apply reserve instances to it. All right. You will still get the consumption-based incentive program. There are CSP margins and rebates that is part of it. And the thing that I don't really mention is the file servers. So it depends on how many users you have. With more users and more control, if you want more controls on the user profiles, then you might want to deploy your file service, and your file service needs to be running 24/7. So you'll be applying your hybrid benefit and reserve instances against the file service as well. But with the SMB market, what I would traditionally look at is, instead of deploying file servers, maybe have a look at Azure Files, because what you can do is you sit them in the same region. The access time and to the Azure Files is actually quite minimal, right? So you can take full advantage of running Azure Files and using a PaaS service instead of looking after file servers and patching. Now, FS Logics. So I spoke about user profile technology before, right? How do you store the user profiles and everything? So traditional RDS roaming profiles has had a lot of issues with things like Office 365, especially. and especially with OneDrive, right? Um, some of the CSP partners out there listening to this will probably be aware of this and have seen this issue before in the past. With that, Microsoft has purchased the company FS Logics. FS Logics used to do this profile containerization technology. They provide special profile containers or special profile technologies that replaces the roaming profiles and photo redirection and allows for a lot of optimization to the Office 365 suite. Right? This helps with the OneDrive redirection. Outlook is another key one. It also fixes the Windows Search database issues that users were having in virtual desktop environment. The FS Logics is provided to all of the SKUs as part of all of the SKUs available to WVD as part of its offering. So if you have a SKU, if you have a license that gives you access to WVD, you will get FS Logics as part of that entitlement. And we do recommend, and FS Logics is the one that you would deploy to Azure files or a file server. And what happens is when the user logs in, the profile container gets attached on login time, therefore improving the login performance and user experience in the long run. Next, we want to talk about App Azure. So App Azure is a specialist department within Fast Track. So there's the Windows and Office 365 Fast Track team that looks after migration and deployments into Windows 10 and Office 365. You need 150 seats plus to get into the Fast Track program, but part of that program is App Azure team, where you get packaging specialists that look after and look out for application compatibility issues that if you've got deploying into Windows 10 or compatibility to Office 365 Pro Plus or Windows Virtual Desktop. So Windows Virtual Desktop has been added to the list of things that App Azure team is checking, right? So let's say we've got an application in Windows 7 that we need to migrate into Windows 10. So the idea is that we've got 150 seats of Office 365 or WVD users, right? And we've got a Windows 7 application that can't, that we've had issues moving in the past into Windows 10, 2016. What you can do is apply to App Azure and get them to help you fix the issues around that application, trying to move that into the new Windows 10 environment. They will then they will issue some packaging specialists, application specialists, who assist you in remediating the issues like shims and making sure that the registry changes on Windows 10 that allows you to sort of run the application. So they'll do the advisory assessments and remediation part, right? What they don't do is code rewrite, so they won't rewrite the application for you, right? But they will definitely try. If they can't get it into Windows 10 for you, you're probably going to have to drop that application and look at a more modern application, or get the developer to develop a modern. So this is the application compatibility promise that Microsoft has put out, and this is all about the App Azure team. Right? They're committed to ensuring all the applications work specifically to the latest versions of Microsoft software. So the latest versions of Office 365. If you're doing WVD, you're gonna run the latest version of Windows 10 running on WVD, right? So this is sort of a requirement, but you will get the assistance from the professionals, the specialists in their field. Let's have a look at the WVD cost savings scenarios and also the solution configurator spreadsheet that is available to the partners to use for pricing out the solution. Right? WVD allows CSP partners to build managed services on desktop as a service solutions. This is basically by using the tools on Azure, you can build a compelling solution that provides the best user experience and enhanced security and simplified management. Right? So what this means is don't just deploy WVD, move the customers into it, and then forget about it. Right? Build your managed service around it by saying, think about a DaaS solution, desktop as a service solution, in a more of a software as a service type scenario rather than an infrastructure as a service type model, right? So don't sell them the desktop and they sort of pay for it on a margin, but sell them the service sitting on top of the desktop and access to the desktop. You take on board the cost of running the desktop, maintaining the desktop, and looking after the desktop, running on a multi-tenanted environment. If you do that, then doing a go-to-market campaign for this is a lot easier. You can use something like Azure Lighthouse to put your solution up in the Azure Marketplace, and you can sort of target additional customers outside of your current scope, which is mostly in New Zealand, right? By putting it up on a marketplace, we can start looking at targeting customers outside, because you're the desktop as a service provider. At the end of the day, to Microsoft, you're actually the service provider, the customer to them. For the best virtualized end user experience, WVD allows for connections from any device like Mac OS, Linux OS, thin clients, Apple, Android tablets. You can even run the connection to WVD without the agent. You run it on an HTML5 web page, and you can get the connections into WVD from there. Right? With the FS Logics profile containers, you sort of get very, very good, extremely fast logon time, and that's because of the containerized user profiles. You're not copying files from a roaming profile into the temporary Windows directory, right? You're actually mounting the FS Logics container profiles onto that session with the user, so there's no copying. It's just mounting directly. So the net result is extremely fast logon time. You've got support with Windows Hello for Business, which means when you log in, you can use your fingerprint scanner and your facial recognition, just like you would with a Windows 10 running on your laptop. The optimization for Office 365, that is actually key, because it's built-in optimization to the image for Windows 10 or Windows Virtual Desktop. You don't have to go in and tweak and change different optimizations for it. Teams will be enhanced. There is actually it's April tomorrow. So in April 2020, there has been news that Teams will have better experience in multi-session environments, in hosted desktop environments, and this is coming. And with Windows Virtual Desktop, the Microsoft is concentrating on building that compatibility into Windows Virtual Desktop. Um, then we look at the enhanced security advantages that you get out of Windows Virtual Desktop. By putting Windows 10 on Azure, you're benefiting from all of the investment that Microsoft has put into the likes of the Azure Security Center, you know, or all of the other Azure security services like from Azure AD and role-based access control, right? With Azure AD, we talk about MFA, CA, RBAC. There's also a reduced attack surface because you're not opening up your RDS servers directly to the internet, which is what a lot of SMBs would traditionally do. You're connecting with reverse connect technology through the control plane into the VM, right? So everything is being funneled in through a controlled network security group and an SG, and you can sort of protect better that way. More importantly, though, is that WVD, even with the multi-session environment on Windows 10, users are isolated from each other. The sessions are isolated from each other. They're not sharing the session, right? Especially with the profile containers, there is no sharing of sessions, right? Each session is an isolated desktop for that user, even on the multi-session Windows 10 environment. Complexity of management is also sort of simplified, and it's more efficient to deploy on WVD. With the new management portal that is coming up in Azure portal for WVD, this is sort of due in April as well. So by the time if you guys are watching this webinar online and not live, then by that time, hopefully the WVD management portal is available on the Azure portal. Top of that, you've got the flexibility for deployment. You've also got, you can sort of scale up and scale down whenever you need to. You can employ disaster recovery scenarios for your WVD environment. You can have a disaster site out in, your main production site in Sydney and a disaster site out in Melbourne. And if Sydney were to get a full power cut across the board everywhere, citywide or region-wide, then you can always fail over to the secondary region if you've configured the design properly, right? I mean, also with that, there's also actual management of the actual desktops, with power management and scalability. WVD has that ability to scale. Right? It provides you with the technology to scale, just like you would with a lot of the more expensive solutions like Citrix and VMware. The partner ecosystem is quite strong with WVD. With Citrix and VMware, they are the approved providers and they're fully compatible with WVD. And they are, Citrix Cloud is fully on board, and they're currently already deploying Windows 10 multi-session environments with Citrix Cloud. VMware is currently still on preview, not really in production yet, but it'll be coming soon as well. There's also additional third-party value-add partners that helps with WVD, especially around the diagnostics and user monitoring space, the automation deployment space with Nerdio, the application layering space with some of these vendors. I know there's also print server management. Let's say you want to get rid of the print server on premises, and this is sort of the scenario with a lot of modern workplace. you can sort of deploy the software as a service type print service, you know, capabilities to supplement your modern workplace with WVD as well. So this part, we're gonna have a look at the WVD solution configurator spreadsheet. One of the key things we gotta remember is you need internet connectivity. So what the spreadsheet actually does is it pulls Azure pricing and spec data from Azure directly, right? And you're gonna have the ability to run macros on your machine. If macros are disabled and internet connectivity is disabled, then you might not, you won't be able to use the automated functions of the solution configurator, and you have to key in the data yourself, right? Let me pull up the configurator here. I've got a sample configurator that I've configured for 20 seats to 50 seats. This is what it is. So here's the solution configurator. There's a how-to document on the front. Every version of the configurator that gets released, you'll see a change log saying, you know, what has been added and everything. There's two sections to it. There's a simple version and a comprehensive version. For the SMB market, especially up to large SMBs, you know, up to 200, 500 users, you can probably just get away with using the simple version, the quick solution. And that's mainly because calculating things like licensing cost and you know the difference between the licensing costs for before and after, that can be done by hand pretty easily. You don't really need to go into such a complex different profiles, because the comprehensive version is very comprehensive. You got to go through a lot of different tabs or sheets before you actually completed it. The simple version is just a single sheet. You would click the refresh button to refresh, but then always ensure you got internet connectivity by pressing the check internet button, and it'll tell you that you connected to the internet, right? In here you can set it to any currency you want. Because we're in New Zealand and this is targeted to the New Zealand channel, to the New Zealand SMB channel, you typically want to set this to NZD. You can also say, if you've got hybrid use benefit, then you would want to enable this. But note that hybrid use benefit is not set, it's not targeted to the session host. Obviously, because the session host is already running on Linux rates. You can't get a Windows Server OS discount on a Linux rate VM. So that's the logic of that. This is more for the file server that you're running. What this solution configurator doesn't take into account is the Active Directory, the domain controller. You've got to add that separately. So use the pricing calculator and add that. And what you want to do is you can set the different OS types. So Windows 10, this is exclusive mode, one-to-one mode. Windows 7 VDI mode. Windows 10 multi-session mode, right? The user type is, what kind of user do we have? Do we need graphics based users? Are we heavy workload users? Are we medium-sized workload users? I traditionally just go with medium. But if you really want to sort of cram as many users onto a machine as possible, then you're going with a light mode type user. Yeah, that's actually up to your decision. You gotta understand your users to be able to do that. How many users did you calculating for? And peak concurrency is how are your resource optimized, right? How many users at peak? So we're saying 80%, which means we'll have to have 24 users. If 24 space for 24 users to cater for 20 named users, right? That's sort of the example that we're looking at here. Whether it's pooled or personal. So do we want to have personal connections or pooled hosts? This is typically for VDI. With Windows 10 multi-session, you wouldn't really look into pool or personal because obviously it's multi-session already, so it's pool to begin with. Yeah. So with Windows 10 multi-session, the other thing you got to set is on the pre-configuration portion on the right side here. You want to set, what's your maximum peak hours per month? What's your threshold peak hours per month? So what's the bare minimum? And how many VM redundancies you gotta have? So if you put 2, then you gotta have at least 2 for resiliency, right? Um, Other things you gotta look out for is you know the different yeah, here it is, the number of users per vCPU, right? You might need to override this because if you put more users per vCPU, you're cramming more users into the VM, right? But that's at the expense of user experience. So you've got to be doing some sort of assessment. If the customer already has an environment on premises, um, have a look at running an assessment on premises and seeing what the utilization is. Right? If you guys need any assistance in these kind of things, just get in touch with me. I'm, I've done a lot of end user computing solutions around, especially around the Citrix environments, but also in RDS. So come talk to me about it, and then we'll go through each scenario that you need to sort of look after when you're into it. You can also override the type of machines that you want to run. Obviously, the bigger SKU machines, the more RAM and CPU, the more cost, but also you can cram more users into it, right? Um, and then down here, you set the OS size, how many disk you want to set for data disk. If your application needs to run on the D drive on the session host itself, remember that this is not going to be where your profile is stored. This is more about if we need another drive for persistent data or some sort of application logs that you need to keep. You typically have a drive for this. I normally put a 20 gig drive on the side in case I want to ship some sort of persistent logging data or SCOM or operations management or antivirus solutions. Scanning logs and update logs and things like that. Then you would audit log, you would put it in here. Then you get the infrastructure storage, which is, typically for file servers, infrastructure storage would be targeting your profile store, so your FSLogix containers, right? This is where you would put that. You have the choice in this calculator to use NetApp or file server. Microsoft's recommendation by default is NetApp, but NetApp is not really a lot of the SMB market doesn't really look at NetApp. That's because there is sort of a minimum buy to Azure NetApp files, and it's overkill for a lot of solutions within the SMB market, right? You would typically just deploy a simple file server or 2 simple file servers at HA, replicated to each other, and with enough data store, with a data store big enough to host the profiles for the users. And here is the profile store disks that you would do. By default, they say to put 2 terabytes. I've dropped it down to 1 terabyte. And also the disk tier, you can choose between standard, SSD, and premium. That depends on the amount of IOPS that you need on your profile store. The more users you've got sitting on one disk, the higher the IOP you need. Right? This will all relate to the user experience in login time and log off time. Um, you would typically adjust that accordingly. And then the file server VMs, you want to obviously bare minimum is one file server. What you could do is replace this entire section with Azure files and do a Azure pricing calculator calculation on that. So just remove or ignore this entire section and just do Azure files and have a look at how much that would cost. And then that would sort of save you on these costs here. And then this is the end of the calculator, and it tells you how much you're getting, and then you can apply your EA or CSP discounts to here. Typically on CSP you're looking at around there, just based on what the margins are basically, right? And then there you go. Let me slide back here. So yeah, that's pretty much the WVD calculator configurator. So that's all the description there. Let's have a chat with the WVD Lighthouse program. Now, so this is not to be confused with Azure Lighthouse. Azure Lighthouse is the ability for you to create a managed service offering for customers by connecting or creating an automated connection to their tenant for management of their tenant, right? Of their subscriptions and their resource group. The WVD Lighthouse program is actually a sales program. I've talked about this during the sales program module. I just want to go into this in a bit more detail right now. The Lighthouse program helps partners on their customers' journey to WVD. Right? Basically, the idea is Microsoft wants to give our partners the confidence and build their maturity on building solutions to WVD, and one of the ways of doing that is by pulling the customers onto this Lighthouse program. The WVD Lighthouse program is actually targeted for CSP partners that have 100 plus RDS users, monthly active RDS users across their entire portfolio. So not a specific customer, but all of their customers combined. If you have at least 100 users, then you should be looking at the WVD Lighthouse program, right? Because what you want to do is there's 3 phases to it. In SMB, we might not actually reach the 3rd phase, but each phase is exclusive and independent of each other. So you can enter each phase at any time. You can even skip the trial phase if you want to. And what I recommend SMB market for the SMB customers or SMB partners to do is sort of build into the production pilot rather than the trial, or combine the trial phase and the production pilot phase together in one suite. That's because the projects you would do in WVD for the SMB market tends to be a lot quicker and a lot smaller. So you don't really need to go through the whole step-by-step phase of engaging the customer, getting their interest, doing an intro, doing a POC, and then coming back with a pilot agreement to go into production pilot. A lot of it is more just going, hey, you've got 25 users, let's have a look and see if we can do this, and go into the production pilot phase straight away. Within New Zealand, the WVD Lighthouse program has this incentive here. Well, we'll talk about the Azure credits first. Within CSP, you've got the CSP POC credits. So you got to be using the CSP POC credits, and you can potentially get more out of that in POC credits rather than I mean, it is still the Azure credits are a 1-to-1 10-to-1 what do you call it, 10-to-1 ROI, return on investment, but request for the POC credits instead, because that's the way you should go, the track you should go down on as a CSP partner. The incentives are mainly for CSP partners or Microsoft partners that are eSIF ready, as in the customer incentive comes in the form of eSIF, and a lot of partners are actually not eSIF ready. The ones that are not, Microsoft New Zealand has come up with an idea where um, instead of giving you the incentive, what they would do is if you have a 25 seat monthly active user potential project, within 3 months. Typically, when we look at these WVD projects, what we've been told is, up to 100 seats, there's about a 2 to 3 week turnaround from start to finish, right? So 3 months is plenty. What Microsoft will do is Microsoft will provide a CSP to the CSP provider, professional services expert on WVD deployments. They will come in, they will assess, design, consult, and deploy the solution with you as the CSP partner to the customer. You hold the relationship with the customer, but the professional will come in and help you deploy. And then once the deployment is over, they'll hand over all documentation to you to use as sort of a guidance and template for you to span out, scale to the rest of your customers or new customers going forward, right? It's basically to enable you and bring you a product to be sold in the market. Also part of the production pilot is the access to acceleration tools like Lakeside, Liquidware, Citrix Cloud, Nerdio, and Cloud Jumper, right? So these tools will be accessible on a certain time, typically around that 3 month mark that we're looking at. But what it gives you the ability to do is enhance the migration experience for the customer as part of that. So this is sort of a high-level workflow of how you would approach engaging into the WVD Lighthouse program. Right? You would first target a customer, a potential customer that you feel that would suit WVD. Have a chat with them about it and see if they're interested. If they're interested, then we register for interest and get into the trial. But while we're doing that, right, and this is what I'm recommending to the SMB market, is sort of engage that 25 seat opportunity at the same time, right? Just get it over and done with, because being an SMB, we're more about being quick, developing quick solutions for customers, right? So have a look at getting that 25 seat pilot production pilot type opportunity done. And then once you qualify for that solution, you've got a qualified statement of work, a signed statement of work. Then we'll submit it to Microsoft through your CSP provider, for example, exeed. So come to us and we will submit it through the right channels for you. Right? And then Microsoft will then go through the steps of providing that partner. Now, if you are eSIF ready or you're willing to go down the track of getting eSIF ready, then we'll have to have a chat with the Microsoft PDM to try and get you eSIF ready. But typically, eSIF is sort of reserved for a lot of the bigger consumption partners. It's more about if you're going to have multiple opportunities in Azure that is bringing more than 5,000 each opportunity, 5,000 monthly Azure consumption each opportunity, then it will pay to go down the track of getting eSIF ready. It is a long process, and there's a lot of documentation to go through. But I mean, if you do get into the scenario where you're building a situation, I'll talk about that later, but the scale phase is a 500 seat target, right? We'll talk about that in a later slide here. But the trial is sort of a low risk approach to sell WVD to the customer. So if you want to get an idea of what WVD is about, To be honest, having a look at the technical documentation online is actually more than enough to cover all of this. You don't really need to go down this track. The information is already available online, and if you're a CSP partner, you can actually deploy a WBD solution onto a test tenant and test it all out already. The pilot solution, the production pilot solution, um, here is sort of a programmatic guide to how you should approach that. When you qualify the customer for production pilot, um, you've already had a chat with them and you're looking for a statement of work. Are the pilot objectives met? So you figured out what they need to do. You get the statement of work signed, right? And you've got a clear idea of what the end state, what you sold to the customer is. And then we will align with Microsoft through exeed. Exeed will go through and have a chat with we'll go through our PDM and try and align with the Microsoft seller, and get signed up into the WBD Lighthouse program, and then um, Microsoft will assign the resources required to achieve the program. Now, to scale to reach the scale phase, right? To reach the scale phase of the Azure WBD Lighthouse project, you've got to have 500 monthly active users for starters in the statement of work, right? But this doesn't mean that it's 500 users on a customer. If you are a partner looking to build a desktop as a service, then you yourself are the customer, right? And you've got 500 seats potential that you will grow, right? So you're gonna build a solution to cater for at least 500 seats. Then let's try and submit that through and get onto the program, because part of the offerings from the scale phase is access to the engineering resources for WBD, access to engineering support for WBD, right? And access and direct access to the global black belt that is available for WBD, or the champions available in New Zealand, right? This will give you the opportunity to voice your concerns as well as get feedback faster and quicker on support during deployment. So if you've got an opportunity for 500 seats, let's put that through. And with that, that's the end of the Azure CSP SMB Sales Fundamental series. I really hope you've enjoyed these webinars. We've reached the Q&A section. I will let the event run for another couple of minutes. Please submit any Q&A, and I'll get back to you directly on email. Also, reach out to me by email, and I will try and get back to you, and we can have a good chat about it. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy this webinar.